Welcome to another 90-second website builder video tutorial. My name is Greg Hughes. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can make a responsive website with this great software. So what's a responsive website? Well, a website that's responsive is one that has a layout that changes according to the device that's looking at it. In other words, if you look at a responsive website on, say, a smartphone or a tablet, a responsive website will respond to the size of that device and change its layout to fit the device appropriately, as opposed to looking at the same website on a desktop computer. So I'm going to show you how version 10 of 90-second website builder gives you a unique set of tools that makes responsive design very easy. In the conventional way, to build a responsive website is very, very difficult. There's a lot of code and there's a lot of pre-planning that has to go into building a responsive website. And 90-second website builder makes it as easy as possible with the drag and drop design advantage. Let me show you what a responsive website looks like first. So I'm building one right now here called the Snowball Factor. Let's do a preview of what I'm working on. And right now we're looking at this website in a desktop browser. And so my website looks the way that it does. But watch what happens because this website is responsive. If I shrink the browser down to, say, the size of a tablet, you'll notice that the website changes very subtly. I don't know if you saw that. I'll go back. See, that's the desktop size. I'm going to go down to the tablet size. You'll notice that the website changed just slightly. My video got a little bit smaller. And there were some other minor changes that were very subtle. This menu is the same size, but it moved over to fit inside this particular browser size. In fact, if I keep going smaller, you'll see that it will then fit a smartphone size browser, which is about 320 pixels. So watch what happens when we get to this size, and you'll notice it changes significantly. Notice my menu fits vertically. My fonts are smaller and my video is even smaller yet. In fact, I don't even have some text showing on here because I don't want this text on the mobile version. Well, how does the website know to do that? Well, with 90-second website builder, you have a way of doing this very easily. So let me stretch it back out. There's the tablet size. There's the desktop size. So let's close this and study what we've done. Basically, the way it works in 90-second website builder is you're allowed to create a web page and then assign different variations of that web page called breakpoints. Here's how we do that. You'll notice with this particular project I'm working on, you'll see here at the top in the menu bar a couple of little arrows that you might not have noticed before. Here's one. Here's one, and then there's not a third arrow, but this is the end of the ruler here. And right now we're looking at what we call the default or the desktop version of the site. If I were to click on this arrow, you can see that I have a different design now, and my canvas size changes, and this is where I've designed the tablet version of my website. If I click on this arrow, you can see where I've designed the smartphone version of my website. It's all the same web page, the same canvas, and in some cases even the same objects, but they're set to be at a different breakpoint so that when a device is looking at this website, it will pick the appropriate variation. I can toggle these back on and off. If I click this again, we'll go back to the default view, which is what you're seeing here. So how did I create these? Well, let me show you. Under the page menu, we have a section for responsive design and an area where we can manage our breakpoints. It's easy to add a breakpoint by simply clicking the breakpoint button and then choosing what width you want it and clicking OK. There are some preset widths if you want, because the most common breakpoints are going to be at 320 for smartphones, 768 for most tablets, and then some other sizes if you want to use them. You can have as many as 25 breakpoints, although it's going to be more common for you to just make probably 3 or 4. Your desktop version is always called the default breakpoint, and that's all the way out to here. So as you can see, I've got 3 variations and therefore 3 versions of the same web page. Now, let me show you a couple of things about planning your responsive website. I'm going to go to a blank page, a completely different project, and start over and show you how to set up your responsive site design. I'm going to close this for now. We'll come back to this later. So I'm going to go to a new website under the file menu. We'll save changes to this one because we're going to come back to it. And we're going to start with a whole new project so I can show you how to do this. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind. This is very important. There's 2 different ways you want to go about this. One is you can start off just deciding on how many breakpoints you want to have. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages to this, but let's do it this way first. So here I just have a regular blank web page with nothing on it. And let's say say I want to decide that I'm going to have a breakpoint at 320. So I click OK. There's my 320. And then I'm going to add another breakpoint at, let's say, 768 for my tablet size and say OK. And now I have 3 variations of my website. If I click on here, I'll see this ruler size. I can toggle it back to the default, and now I have 3 variations of the website. Now there's nothing on this website, of course. I just set up my breakpoints. Now you can do that if you want to. However, like I said, there's some disadvantages, and I'll show you that in just a minute. If I do it this way, then I have to know that whenever I place an object on the canvas, I have to be aware of what variation I'm working with. For example, let's go grab an image, and let's take this image that's got the number 1 in it. Now I've placed an image on the canvas, but notice I'm working in the default variation of this responsive page. This image only shows on this page. If I toggle to the tablet size, it's still blank. And if I toggle to the mobile size, it's still blank. That image only appears on the page I was working on. The advantage of that is you can make sure you have full control over what each variation looks like. See, one of the downsides of conventional responsive design is you have very little control over the design flexibility because the device kind of decides what your website's going to look at. But version 10 of 90-Second Website Builder gives you the best of both worlds. You not only get responsive design, but you get to decide exactly what each variation looks like because we have this drag and drop canvas to work with. Just remember that if you decide to design your responsive site this way, you'll be working with 3 variations. So if I put an image on the default page, it won't necessarily show on these other pages. So for example, let's pull up this variation and put another image, pick image number 2, and we'll put this just on the 320 pixel variation. So now when we look at our design, we're looking at the default. Now we're looking at the tablet, which has nothing. And now we're looking at the mobile version, which has this object. What if all of your variations actually do share the same image or the same text in the same location? Is there a way for them to share? There is. So we're going to start over. I'm going to show you how that works. I'm going to delete this object. I'm actually going to go back to the default and delete this. And this time, let's start over. What I'm going to do is actually go to Manage Breakpoints. Let's remove them by clicking on this, remove this, remove. And now we're starting again with a conventional page with nothing on it and no breakpoints. Let's say you wanted a logo that appears in the corner of all of your variations. No matter what device people are looking at your website, you want that logo. Here's how you do it. Notice that we have not made any breakpoints yet. That's important. And we're going to just design our default page first. And one of the things we want on our default page, let's say, is this logo with the number 3 in it. Well, now that I've done this and I can add other objects to my website, for example, let's say this is going to be some text that I also want to appear in every variation. Once I've designed my default page with all of the objects that are going to be common to the rest of the variations, then I would go back and go to the page menu and start making my breakpoints. What will happen now, since I've already designed the default page, is when I add a breakpoint, here I'm adding the 320, you'll notice that the 320 shares these objects with the default. So I don't have to double my work. Let's add another breakpoint. This time I'll add the 768 for tablets. The 768 version or variant also shows these objects because they are shared across the variations. Now that can be very convenient so that you don't have to keep copying and pasting and placing the same objects over and over again in your variations. The lesson here is you want to plan your responsive design. First, I recommend starting with just your default page and don't add any breakpoints. Start adding in the elements that you want, images and text and whatever you want onto your default page. Then go back and add your breakpoints so that the objects can be shared. Additionally, from this point on, since we've added our breakpoints, we can still add objects that will be unique to each breakpoint. This time, I'll add an object, let's make it this Twitter bird, that's only going to appear in the mobile version. So it's only in this variation. You'll notice if I toggle this off, it does not appear on the default page. And if I click on this, it does not appear on the tablet page. It only appears on my mobile page. And that's because I added this object after my breakpoints were created. Once again, you're going to want to create your default page first, put all of the objects on it that you want shared across the variations, get them in place, and then create your breakpoints and start designing each variation to be its unique web page. I could do that again. Let's pick another image. This time let's use the Facebook image just to make the point. So now we're looking at the second variation, the tablet. And now we'll click on here and you can see this version of the website shows these objects. This version of the website, which is the default, only shows this because I didn't put anything there. Having said that, when you work with backgrounds, whether you've created your default page first and added your breakpoints later, backgrounds are always shared across the variations. So here I am on my default page. It wouldn't matter whether I was on my default page or I'm on my first variation. If I go to page properties and I select a background, we'll find an image. And I'll make my background be, let's say, this sort of light gray. So here's my background. You'll notice no matter what happens when I change variations, the background will always be shared across the variations. So now, having shown you the way to get set up, let me show you what I did in creating my responsive site. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and this is just a demo, so I don't really need to save it. I'm going to go back to this one. I'm going to say no to saving this. It's just a demonstration. And open up the project I called Responsive Snowball. Here's my default page. I am using a background. If we right-click and go to Page Properties, you'll see that I did choose a background from this list that happens to be this blue stripe kind of a thing with the gray area down here. I also wanted some objects to be on the other variation. So for example, this menu works great even on the tablet, except that it's too far over because the tablet variation is going to end at about 768 pixels right here. So when I went to my tablet variation, by clicking on this, you'll see that I moved this menu over. Now this is not the same menu as the one that's on my default. It's not shared because otherwise if I changed the position, it would also change the position on the default version. So this is a second menu. I made a third menu for my smartphone variation because I wanted it to be vertical, even though it's the same information. So I changed that entirely. This is a third CSS menu that I made vertical and with smaller font so that it fits in the real estate of this page better. Also notice that I used a smaller font for the snowball factor here than I did, for example, with my default variation or my desktop version, because obviously I have more space to work with. I also changed the size of my video. So I have a video that's about 565 pixels wide here, but I don't have the space, for example, on my smartphone. So I put this video here. It's the same video, but not the same object. This one's only 270 pixels wide, so it fits within this variation. So I think you get the idea of what you can do. Remember, working with 3 variations is going to be the most common, and you can have as many as 25, which means that you could make your website be as complex as you wanted to and as responsive as you wanted to. You're just going to want to kind of plan out how you're going to do it. So again, to recap, I would recommend starting with making your default page, putting the objects on your website that you want common, and then add your breakpoints and start moving things around. You can copy paste from one variation to the other and then adjust that object. That's what I did here. So when I was working with this bit of text, I could copy it and then go to this variation and paste it, as you can see, and then I could edit it down by double clicking on it and changing the font size, etc. And that's what I did and came up with this version of it. So those are 2 separate objects on 2 separate variants. So what you end up with is extreme design flexibility, which is very, very unusual to have the ability to have full design flexibility and still get a responsive website out of it. And yet 90-second website builder version 10 has made that now possible. I also would recommend that you read the 90-second website builder online help. There is a help file here, and if you go to the help file by clicking this, you'll bring up the documentation about this. Also, read the 90-Second Website Builder User's Manual. It's available at the 90secondwebsitebulder.com website. And there are some rules about working with responsive design, some things that work differently for some objects. For example, if you're going to be working with shapes, they work a little bit differently. You're going to want to know how to do that. Or if you're going to be working with carousels or jQuery accordions, just know that certain objects cannot be shared that are inside those particular objects. Do a little bit of studying and playing around with responsive design, and I know you'll find that this aspect of 90-Second Website Builder is absolutely powerful and will make your websites look very professional and now responsive on any device your website is viewed on.